Hello and welcome again to Backpage. I'm Jody C. and today we're visiting with Karen Gilden about her new book, and this is called Camping with the Communists. Okay, I was intrigued by the title. It's a great memoir of something that you guys did, you and your husband Ray and your daughter Jennifer, that was either really brave or really stupid. You know, so welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Tell me about,
Thank you for inviting me.
Tell us this story.
Oh gosh.
There we were.
Yeah, there we were. Well, I think some people did think it was kind of stupid that we went.
Well, not that you went necessarily, but when you went.
We went in 1977.
Yeah. And when Brezhnev,
Yes.
who was like, I don't know, the meanest communist bastard you'd ever want to come across, I thought. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Well, it was part of a longer 6-month journey through Europe that we planned for a long time. And I had been studying Russian at the University of Oregon, and Russian and East European Studies was a major. And so we decided to add a trip to the Soviet Union as part of our circle through Europe. And we spent 6 weeks there driving from Finland. We crossed in from Finland and drove south down to the Black Sea and back up and out to Kiev and then to Romania. So it was 6 weeks on the road, basically, very tight schedule, and meeting people along the way, you know, having all kinds of adventures along the way with
Some of which
Russians.
involved the KGB.
Yes, we met the KGB often.
So do you think they just glommed onto you because you were Americans and they thought something's up?
No, I think they followed all the tourists, all the Western tourists.
Okay.
It wasn't just us, they followed everybody. So they were always in the campgrounds. You know, almost every campground had a resident KGB that kept his eye open. And they always approached us, you know, 2 young men usually, sometimes one, wanting to show us the town and talk to us, and we always said no.
But did the people at the campground always say, KGB?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
People knew about it. Yeah.
So I was kind of shocked that you would take your 11-year-old daughter on this trip as well. I mean, really, because, you know, I mean, who knows what could happen.
Well, actually, we were pretty safe. I mean, foreigners were very safe at that time because the Soviet government wasn't about to allow some kind of international incident over a tourist. And the Soviet people were pretty much, I mean, there were police everywhere, and the people were pretty squashed, you know. So there wasn't a lot of theft. There wasn't. I mean, for tourists, they would have gotten into a great deal of difficulty if they'd threatened us or hassled us in any way, you know. So we felt pretty safe the whole time we were there, and and I knew a lot about the country going in because I'd been studying it for a long time, and I'd been interested in the Soviet Union and in Russia before that for years, and had read a lot about it.
What about it was so fascinating to you?
Oh, I don't know exactly. I read War and Peace in high school, and I was just taken with the whole country, the culture, and I just wanted to see it desperately. I don't know whether it's like, maybe I lived there one time, you know, I don't know, but it was just a fascinating place for me, and it was very exciting to be there and see it again, you know. But it was a tough trip too. Yeah.
So you toured in a Volkswagen van.
Yes.
That you bought in Europe.
We bought new.
Okay. And I think that was a good choice. I've seen a number of broken down Volkswagen vans, you know, that are several generations.
Right.
So I think getting a new one was a good idea.
Well, they said if it broke down, they would just tow us to the border because there weren't any car parts available.
Oh gosh.
So it was either that or you know, be towed. So
there seemed to be not much available.
There was very little available in the way of consumer goods.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, but the part of Russia that seemed to be the most well supplied for some reason was Georgia.
Yes.
And why was that?
You know, that's a good question, and I'm not sure I can give you an answer.
It was part of the USSR
it was,
then.
yes, it was part of the USSR, and it was very far away, and from Moscow, which is the center of power and where everything kind of went to. And I think they, well, there were some people high in the Communist Party from Georgia. Stalin, I believe, was from Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. And I think they just allowed them a little more freedom, because of that. There was a lot of corruption in the government. And I think that was part of it. And also they had a habit of allowing some of their countries, like Estonia, for instance, that we also visited, to be on a little looser leash, you could say. They had a little more freedom. They had a few more consumer goods, just because to keep them in line, kind of, to keep them tied to the Soviet state.
Yeah. There's a pretty large Russian community here in Oregon.
There is, yes.
Which I've always found kind of surprising.
Yeah.
But one time I was in a cab, and I just like to know where people are from. I'm not going to do anything with information. And so this guy was driving the cab, and he sounded Russian, but I said, "So where did you grow up?" And he went, "Why do you care?" And I'm like, "Hey man, I don't care. I'm just trying to make conversation." I was like, usually people want to tell you, but boy, he didn't. I guess he thought I was going to tell on him or something. I don't know. Anyway, so what was the most meaningful part of this trip for you, do you think?
Well, I think the anecdote that I started with, which was being in Moscow and visiting this couple that we had arranged to see before we left here, and it had to be done very secretly. And we went to their apartment, and then we went to a park to talk.
Is everything bugged over there, or
yeah,
was everything
pretty much
bugged?
everything is bugged. Yeah.
Really?
He unplugged the phone, and we were there, and said, maybe listeners. So, and it was that conversation with him asking about our trip and how we got there. And I said, well, it was just an idea that we had, and we planned, and we saved our money, and here we are. And he said, well, we can have thousands of ideas, but they all die within us. And that, really hit home for all of us. It was a very moving statement.
Yeah.
And
because yours didn't.
that's right. That's right.
You had an idea.
We had
and
an
you saw
idea,
it
and
through.
it
Yeah.
grew. Yeah.
So tell us, or maybe can you tell us the part about the ring? Without, I mean, it's in a book now. I guess you're not going to get in trouble.
I'm not going to get in trouble. But I have to say, I've changed the names in the books.
Oh, I think that's a good idea.
I didn't at first, but I'm still a little bit paranoid about some of the things that happened there.
Yeah.
So I did that. Yes, the couple that I just was referring to, they had a daughter. She had a daughter who had immigrated to the United States to be with her father, who was Jewish. And when she left, they took a diamond ring off her hand at the border before she got on the plane, and said, you'll have to leave this here, and you'll never see your homeland again. So they said to us when we were there, would you take this back to our daughter? And of course we said, sure. But going into the country, we had signed a slip of paper, one of many, many slips of paper that we had to sign, stating that we didn't have a lot of things that were considered bad. We didn't have drugs, we didn't have Bibles, we didn't have foreign currency, we didn't have any number of things. And one of them was diamonds. So we had said, no, we don't have any diamonds. And they were thorough searchers of the car, so we were a little worried about that. So we didn't know what to do with it. And we talked about it for a long time, and finally Ray came up with the idea of putting it inside a candle. We had some old utility candles, and he melted one of those with some crayon from one of Jennifer's red crayons, I think it was, tied the ring to the string, and cast a candle in a toilet paper roll. And then we burned it down a little bit, and it looked like a real candle. It looked,
Necessity is the mother of invention, isn't it?
It is.
Contraband. Oh my. So when you decided to put all of this memory together into a book. What was that process like? Did you take notes or keep a journal the whole time you were gone?
Yes,
Okay.
we all kept journals. And we kept, we also made tape recordings as we went along, which was a very foolish thing to do, it turned out, but we did.
Foolish, why?
Because when we got to the border, that we were ordered to play one of our tapes, and if we had played one describing,
Right.
you know, what we'd really seen, we would have been in a lot of trouble. Anyway, so we had the tapes, and we
The government here is terrible.
Yes.
The people can never say what they really mean.
You know, another couple that we met there who followed us out and that we stayed in touch with wrote that they were held up a few days after we were because they had found their journals and they had written, "There are lines for food. We're tired of the lines for food." And they were told, "No, there are no lines for food in the Soviet Union." And their journals were ripped up and they were kept 24 hours at the border crossing.
Wow.
So we were very...
With no food, probably.
Yeah, probably. So we were, you know, so it was kind of a stupid thing for us to do to make those tapes. But we, luckily, he picked a music tape and it was no problem. So.
But, you know, my heart would have been going, ta-goon, ta-goon, ta-goon.
You know, I never felt, I think we felt fear occasionally, but mostly just because we thought what the worst they would have done to us is kick us out. I mean, they would have just sent us out, you know. We felt fear often for people that we were with, for Russians that we were with, or whoever they happened to be, because they would have gotten into more trouble than we would. And they were not supposed to talk really with Westerners, and they did. And so most of the fear that we had, I think, was generated around situations like that where we were talking to people who could have gotten into serious trouble. You know.
And so how old were you guys? You were pretty young.
Yeah, we were young. I was 35, 36, I think, and Ray was 38. Jennifer was 11.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting, you know, and kind of life-changing.
Oh, yeah. I would imagine. If you're just tuning in, I'm Jody C., and this program is Backpage. We're visiting with Karen Gilden about her new book, Camping with the Communists. And what was Jennifer's experience?
Well, she was just she was surprisingly open to everything on that trip. I was very proud of her, actually. She was, you know, she was just kind of looking around, watching. She saw what we saw as far as the difference between the freedom and non-freedom, and she was aware of that, and she, you know, was, I don't know, I think it was a great opportunity for her to learn about the world.
So it's a good thing I mean, just like the next year, age 12, is when the sullen monster comes out, you know. I mean, at least at 11, she was still, all right, let's go.
Yeah, she was still very adaptable and willing to go along with whatever we suggested. And we tried to make the trip interesting for her, obviously. We went to things and saw things that we thought would interest her.
Yeah.
And she was just, you know, she was happy with most of the time with whatever we were doing. And she was curious about the Russians. And we had talked about, before we went there, I talked to her about what I knew about the country and what to expect, and so she was prepared, I think.
So how does she view it now as an adult when she looks back on it? Is that like a big thing in her life?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's because we had more trips after that. It was just one adventure. It was. She doesn't remember a lot of the details. She remembers some things clearly, but she doesn't remember a lot. She read a lot while we were on the road. She remembers actually more what she read, I think, in some cases than what we did.
Well, what struck me is like in the 3 or 4 different incidents that I read in the book where you would be about to do something and suddenly somebody would show up out of nowhere with, you know, I saw you with binoculars, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It just made you have the feeling that there was somebody spying all the time on everybody.
Right. Well, that's the way it felt.
Yeah.
You know, there were police everywhere. In the cities, there were police constantly. Every block had 2 or 3 policemen on the corners and around. And on the roads, we were followed often. And there were sometimes watchtowers that, you know, we would see them talking on the phone, leaning out and looking at us and talking on the phone, you know, knowing where we were all the time. And yes, when we went off the designated road, which we could only drive on certain roads, and when we went off those roads, somebody would show up inevitably and say, "It is not possible to be here. You know, you must move on."
So there are only certain roads that any American tourist can drive on, or any tourist can drive on?
Any tourist, any Western tourist. I don't know about the people from the eastern states, but we had a map that they sent us before we left to get in order to get our visas. We had to give them an itinerary of the full time that we were going to be there every night, where we were going to be every night. And it was just a schematic, really, of a map. It wasn't a true map. So it was very difficult to judge distances and things like that.
Well, tell me how long the trip lasted.
It lasted just short of 6 weeks.
Yeah, because it's a long time to be in the car.
It was a long time.
You know.
But we were 6 months actually in the bus in Europe.
Wow.
So the 6 weeks in the car wasn't too bad, actually.
So did you go through Yugoslavia?
Yes.
In the Eastern Europe countries? I used to have this Yugoslavian plumber named Mirko. Mirko. And his brother was afraid his boys were going to get conscripted into the army and get killed. So he sent his boys over to live with Uncle Mirko. And they came to America, and they thought that all teenagers were issued cell phones and then they'd go hang out at the mall. That's just what they thought.
Yeah.
And that's not what Uncle Mirko had in mind for them at all, and put them to work. You know, come on, boys, the money doesn't grow on the trees. Anyway, so would you do it again, knowing what you know now? Or would you do something differently?
Well, I wouldn't make that same trip again because it was exhausting.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were only driving maybe 150, 200 miles a day, usually less than 200 miles a day. And when we planned it out from here, we thought, well, that's easy to do. That will allow us plenty of time to sightsee and stop. And, well, it didn't because the roads were so terrible. Yeah. And because they were unmarked and we often got lost, and because there were very slow trucks that traveled along the highways that we were always following, and because we often had to wait 2 hours in line to get gas.
Yeah.
So it made for very long days, you know, very long.
So how could you budget? Well, when you saved your money, you both worked and saved your money for this trip. How much did you budget for each day, and did that turn out to be accurate?
We budgeted $25 a day
Yeah.
for the three of us, and
That's
that
not
was
much.
that's not very much.
Yeah.
But remember this is 1977,
Yeah.
so
But
gas was 65 cents a gallon or something then.
even there?
There it was much cheaper.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
And food was cheap there. I mean, everything was cheap there, but it was just you couldn't find anything. You know, we had trouble finding food. We had to wait in long lines to buy food often. And we were, as part of our trip, we were given a tour of each city with a guide. And we got to the point where instead of wanting to see the sights, we would say, well, can you take us to the local outdoor market, or, you know, so that we can buy some food, because we had a terrible time finding food.
Yeah. Well, when you took off from, I mean, did you like stock up on food in Finland?
We did stock up on some things,
Okay.
not food necessarily, but things like toilet paper and, you know, things that we knew weren't going to be available.
Why is toilet paper so hard to come by over there?
I don't know.
I mean, they got trees, you know?
It just wasn't on their 5-year plan, I guess. I don't know.
It doesn't make any sense.
It was pretty awful, though.
Because it seemed like in every chapter there was some toilet paper issue.
Yes, there was always toilet paper issues.
Always looking for it.
Yeah.
Hey, you got a different publisher, right?
No, Arthur's Press, same thing.
Okay. I thought you were with Fuse Press before, but I was wrong.
No.
Anyway, so where's this?
That's us.
Okay.
We're doing it.
Good.
Yeah.
So where can people get this book if they're interested
Well,
in reading?
it's going to be available through Ingram
Okay.
as a distributor, so any bookstore can order it.
Okay.
And it'll also be available on Amazon, and it's also going to be available as an ebook
Oh, good.
at just about any, in any format for ebooks. So It'll be widely available. Yeah.
So I know you guys, you two, you and Ray, are travelers.
Yes.
What's the next big adventure? Do you have one?
We don't have one planned right now. We just got back from Hawaii. That's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that was more of a vacation than a trip.
Well, the last time I saw you, you'd been in France.
Yes.
And you were there for how long? 6 months?
Well, we had a house there for 6 years.
6 years?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, and we didn't spend the full year there, but we spent a month, 3 months, and then towards the end we were spending 6 months a year there. And
Wow.
that was fun.
What are the chances of meeting someone who has the same travel bug that you do?
Oh, you know, Jody, there are so many people out there who travel and spend their lives on the road.
Yeah.
You know, and when we travel, that's who you meet. You know, that's who you meet in the campgrounds, is people like us that just love to travel.
Mm-hmm.
So.
What's the coolest place you've ever been?
Oh gosh, the coolest.
I mean, the place that you liked the best and you loved it for one particular reason, and you thought, if I had to pick some place to live, I'd live here.
Well, that would be France.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Healthcare system, for one thing.
Healthcare system.
Which is very good.
Yes, excellent.
Yeah.
And just the culture, the history, the landscape, the food, the wine.
Yeah. All that stuff.
All that stuff.
Yeah. I got a postcard from some friends one time. We were teaching a class in Switzerland, and they went over to the south of France on a vacation. And this postcard said, the food is fabulous, the scenery is lovely, and I almost don't mind it that the French live here. But, you know, maybe you didn't have that experience.
No, we actually always found the French to be very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're living in Sisters now.
Yes.
And what do you do with your day?
Well, for the last 6 months or so, I've been working on this book pretty steadily every day. And Ray cycles a lot. And I've been also doing some freelance writing and doing some articles and sing in the choir and you know, walk every day. I do 3 miles a day and walk. And just enjoying life.
Where's Jennifer now?
Jennifer's in Portland. She's actually the travels that we did, I think, inspired her to become an anthropologist. She's an environmental anthropologist.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, she works for the Pacific Fishery Management Council, and she's the outreach person, and basically an environmental anthropologist is somebody who studies, for instance, she studied both the fishing communities and the logging communities in Oregon, and how those communities are structured, how they work, how they interact with others, and the impact that they have on the economy, all those kinds of things. So now she's outreach for the fishing industry, or for the council.
So, camping with the communists, do you stay in touch with any of the communists?
We have, until just the last few years, been in touch with some of them, yes. There was one young woman who came after we got home who was injured on a fishing boat off the Oregon coast. And she stayed with us for a while after she was out of the hospital, and then went back to the Soviet Union, and she lived in Siberia. And she was our longest contact. We were in regular communication with her up until just a few years ago when she died.
So how'd you get the diamond ring back to the...
Well, that was a young woman who was in Eugene at the time.
Okay.
And so it wasn't difficult to find her. She was the one who arranged for us to meet her parents in Moscow. So.
And she went, what's all this wax in here? What happened to my ring?
Yeah, why is it so red?
So what was the scariest part for you being in the Soviet Union? I mean, when I read your book, the scariest part for me was when the KGB chick showed up at the steps.
Oh, yes.
Because she'd just been in the campground the day before.
Yes.
And it made me wonder if my tent was bugged or my car was bugged or, you know.
That probably was the most frightening experience that we had, because she worked in the campground, and we suspected that she was KGB from the beginning when we met her, because she was very smooth, spoke excellent English, and then she showed up when we were to meet our contact on the steps. we were meeting at high noon on the post office steps, and didn't know quite who we were looking for because we hadn't met her. And just at 5 minutes to noon, the woman from the campground showed up.
Yeah.
And said, "Hi, what are you doing here?" Like she knew we were going to be there.
Yeah.
And since we didn't know exactly who we were meeting, we thought, oh,
Meeting a friend.
We said, well, we're meeting a friend, and she said, oh, and then just then, the friend showed up, and they talked for a few minutes, and then we left with a friend, and I was still like, are we sure this is who we think it is? Are we getting ourselves into trouble here and going off with the KGB unknowingly?
Yeah.
It was kind of frightening. Yeah. Yeah. It was. It was an amazing adventure.
I don't know that I could have done what you did.
Really?
I mean, and
I don't find it that exotic, really.
Well, no, it's just being a baby boomer, growing up, thinking that the communists were going to, invade Dallas at any minute.
Right, right.
And KGB and, and I don't think of anybody living in Siberia on purpose. It's just all of that just sounds really exotically dangerous to me. So.
Well, I don't think it was dangerous. I mean, we wouldn't have taken our daughter if we thought it was dangerous.
Yeah.
We had talked to a lot of people before we went who had been there. A lot of my professors had been there, and I had a good feeling for what we were getting into. But it still was very different too than what I expected. I mean,
Sure.
in some ways it was worse than I thought. In some ways it was better.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel dangerous.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, the way you wrote it, it sounded dangerous to me. So I'm like,
Well, I mean, it felt dangerous at times, but going in, it didn't feel
Yeah.
dangerous. Yeah.
Well, listen, we're going to have to ride on out here, so thanks
All
for
right.
joining us. And we thank you for joining us, too. I'm Jody C. This program is Back Page. Join us again next time as we take another peek at the back page. And remember, we're all in this together. More the same than different. Do your best.